How's it going, everyone? Oh yeah, it's one of those videos. I got dressed up especially for this video because by the time you see this, it'll be 2 days before Christmas. And boy, I freaking love Christmas. And today, I'm gonna review my very favorite Christmas movie of all time. This is the best Christmas movie ever made, in my opinion. It's time for me to review It's a Wonderful Life. Okay, so in the last review, I mentioned that the Santa Claus 3 is basically a retelling of this movie. I didn't really give a proper analysis of that assessment, but in this movie, you'll see what I meant. In this movie, it follows a man named George Bailey. He thinks of everyone but himself, and this is especially evident because he pretty much puts everything on the line to help save his dad's bank. Because ever since he was very little, he's been talking about like, oh, I'm going to go out and see the world. I'm going to go out and I'm going to see Egypt. I'm going to see this place and this place and this place and this place. And he never does. He has the worst day of his life. And the person that he's been competing with all his life in terms of like having to save his dad's bank, Mr. Potter. Okay, first of all, Mr. Potter is the ultimate Christmas villain. Unlike Jack Frost in the Santa Claus 3, the one thing that really snowballs into the worst day of George's life is one thing that it's just one thing. You see, George's uncle, who helped run the bank with George's dad before he passed away, he pretty much like misplaces $8,000 that is essential to keeping the bank afloat, basically. And so he accidentally gives it to Mr. Potter without realizing it. And Mr. Potter, when George comes to him asking for a loan, sacrificing his pride to save the bank that he so desperately loves. And Mr. Potter just says, no. In fact, I hear that you've been doing this illegal thing, so I'm going to call the police and have them arrest you. And everything else happens because George gets frustrated. He wishes that he was never born. And you find out that he was very important because it's told in the perspective of this angel named Clarence. And Clarence learns all about George's life. From the age of 11, George's brother fell through the ice when they were sledding. And George jumped in the ice-cold water to save his brother. And because of that, he caught a cold and he lost hearing in one of his ears. And because he saved his brother, who later went on to serve in World War II, hold on to that. He meets his future wife, Mary, when they were very young. And they kind of flirt, and they are absolutely adorable, which I'll get into the characters in a minute. This one night, when George and Mary are coming home from a dance, it's the funniest thing ever. During the dance, someone actually presses a button. The dance is obviously in the gym, and in that gym, there's like a swimming pool, and they actually fall in, and it happens when they're dancing, and when everyone's just like, oh, because they come so close to falling in so many times, he's just like, wow, we must be really good. George and Mary have such great chemistry. I'm honestly so happy they end up together. He finds out his dad had a stroke, and then it shows like a fast forward a few years, and Mr. Potter basically says, it pretty much says that if George ends up going to college, like he wants to, the bank will have to side with Potter, and they lose everything, basically. So, instead of going to college like he wants to, he pretty much has to stay and help with the bank, and his brother goes off to college. And then George and Mary meet up. At some point, they talk about, like, look, listen, I want to see the world. I want to see the world, and I'm not going to get married. And they pretty much have, like, an argument that ends up with them making out. And then it fast forwards to them getting married. Like, I'm so glad that it happened, because, again, they have such great chemistry. George's brother went off to serve in the army during World War II, and he wins the greatest honor you can possibly earn if you're in the military, the Medal of Honor. Cut to present day. George has the worst day of his life. He pretty much yells at his kids. He yells at his wife. He's like on the phone with one of his daughter's teachers, like, what's the meaning of this? Doing this, basically yelling. And when he goes to the bar, the local bar, he bumps into that teacher's husband, and boom! He punches George. Obviously, he meets Clarence when he's about to jump off a bridge, and then Clarence grants the wish, like, hey, you were never born. I'm gonna show you what life would be like if you didn't exist. His brother Harry died in the ice. He drowned at the age of 9. Mary never got married. You know, George's mother runs, like, an inn, and she has no kids, and she's very bitter. And Mr. Potter owns everything. And George's uncle, because he lost the business, he went insane and ended up in a mental hospital. And because George's brother died, all those men that his brother saved also died. And instead of the place they live in being called Bedford Falls, it's called Pottersville. And everything is just, it's terrible. He decides he wants to live again. And then they have the big happy ending, and everyone comes in to replace the $8,000 that was lost, and he becomes the richest man in town. And everything that made him frustrated before, he just like, yes, yes, yes. And the iconic scene, Merry Christmas, everyone. Merry Christmas, everyone. Merry Christmas, everyone that was mean to me. Merry Christmas, the guy that just punched me out a few hours ago. Merry Christmas, Mr. Potter, even though you tried to put family's business into the ground several times. Merry Christmas. Boy, the classic line. Look, Daddy, teacher says, every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings. Because Clarence didn't have his wings, and he got his wings. And by the way, George, thanks for the wings. They're very spicy, but delicious. George is the most selfless person in the world. He's the most selfless person in cinema history. He does everything for his family and his father's bank. And, like, he wants to see the world, but because life gets in the way, he gives it all up. And just, you really feel bad for this guy, because on one hand, yeah, he didn't get to live out his dream like he wanted, but at the same time, he got a family, and he had an amazing life, whether he realized it or not. I mean, just the sheer dedication, not even just because his dad passed away, just doing it because it's his father's business, and it meant a lot to his dad and his uncle. He saved his brother and never complained about not being able to hear out of his left ear the rest of his life. He never complained about it. Now, with Mary, she's the perfect match for him, because she also gave up a few things for the sake of the bank. Like, right after they get married, they have like $5,000, I think, and they stop by the bank because the bank had run out of money and there was a big mob outside, and she gives away the money for their honeymoon to save the bank, because she's the perfect cinema wife. It's just like, yo, if y'all want a happy life, get a wife like Mary, because she's selfless like George, and she's supportive towards George. And even after George explodes toward the end, all she does is tells the kids to pray for their daddy. The next time she sees George. She doesn't even bring up the fact that he snapped at the kids. She's just glad to see that he's, like he's alive and like everything worked out. I'm so glad they end up getting together. And in terms of Clarence, he's kind of funny, but all in very awkward ways. Just like he talks about being an angel when he probably shouldn't, like around other people. And George is like, I don't think you should be talking about angels and stuff. And Clarence is just like, why? Don't people believe in angels? Well, yeah, but they'll look at you kind of weird if you talk about it. And it's not like a case of like, oh, I'm just helping you so I can get my wings. No, he really cares about George because he just spent an entire hour getting to know George's life story and all that. So he cares about George. And he earns his wings. And honestly, I wish I had a guardian angel like Clarence. Because Clarence is awesome. Alright, with Mr. Potter, you know that you're a villain when you do very little. But the very little that you do has massive repercussions. Like, all he did was just, like, withhold the $8,000 from George. And everything that George does, while it's not really right that he snaps at so many people, at the same time, it's just like, you kind of feel for him, because his life is falling apart. Because of Mr. Potter. Because Mr. Potter is so evil. And he has such a grudge against the Baileys. And ultimately, George becomes more rich than Mr. Potter. So Mr. Potter, you can suck it! Alright, what I didn't like is just this little snippet. It's just this one little thing. It has nothing to do with the story. This movie bombed when it first came out. Yeah, it bombed. Like, it's an inspiring Christmas story. Which the reason why it's such a classic now is because after 7 years it became public domain. And a random TV station, I want to say CBS, but I could be wrong, they aired it on Christmas and it became such a huge success ratings wise that they've played it every year ever since. Final thoughts. This is the best Christmas movie ever. At least in my opinion. Because George Bailey, he goes through a lot of drama in this movie. It's such a dramatic movie. Yeah. You might notice that there's very little jokes in this review. That's why. Because it's such a serious movie. The main reason I wanted to review this movie right before Christmas is because, well, I'm in grief share, and right now we're talking about, like, getting through the holidays, especially, like, Christmas. There's quite a few of us in the group that this is our first Christmas without our loved one that passed away, or loved ones. So, this is a hard time of year for a lot of people. And because this movie talks about suicide, and I've lost people to suicide, it just felt right. Besides being the best Christmas movie ever, in my opinion. So, I hope y'all enjoyed the video. I hope y'all have a very Merry Christmas. And in the meantime, stay positive and stay awesome, everyone. Bye. Merry Christmas.